coming. It's really great to see everybody here. I was a little bit nervous for the last 3 weeks, knowing I was doing this, so I did make a slideshow, which if I just talk through the slideshow, it's about 10 minutes. So, and it's really on my journey of being an artist. I invite you to ask me questions as I go along. And then after, I'm gonna just show some of my recent things that I've been working on and experimenting with. How many artists are there in the audience? Okay. How many engineers? How many daydreamers? Okay, all right, good, we're in good company. All right. When my mother died in 2015, she asked me to make sure everything ends up with the right person. For the last 5 years, I have purged, sifted, and refolded her entire house, which is in Shelburne, Vermont. Along the way, I was struck by how little I found documenting her artistic life as a dance choreographer and a lifelong supporter of the arts in Vermont. Notice any resemblance? Next. She kept archives of so many people around her in neatly labeled file folders. She archived me over many years, saving treasures like drawings from first grade, letters I sent her spanning 50 years, my first pay stubs, and the hospital bill from my birth in Lakewood, California in 1961. After seeing her small collection of files documenting her artistic work, I pledged that I would honor my own life as an artist with a retrospective coming in 2021, which is when I'll be 60. As I reach the milestone of 60 years old, this library talk is a preliminary testing of the waters for this next project. Before kids, I lived the quintessential starving artist's life, moving over 20 times, which I think is actually a low count. In Vermont, I moved through a variety of different towns: Burlington, Warren, Heinsberg, and then New York City, back to Vermont, then to San Francisco, and ultimately back to Vermont. These were my 20s. Along the way, I sold shoes in Soho, screen-printed yardage in Berkeley, apprenticed with a textile designer in Half Moon Bay. I worked in kitchens, cleaned houses, and organized people's closets. No questions yet? I also hand-painted clothes, learned to weave at Parsons School of Design night school, batiqued on my fire escape in Little Italy, took pictures of the many places I've lived. Financially, I lived hand to mouth. I never went into debt, but I never owned much either. What I had was a lot of relationships with friends and community members. My community was my insurance policy. They were my safety net. I had no credit card or cell phone, and certainly no savings account. I took workshops and read books. I was very open to the world, believing the world could work for everyone. And I moved through it, doing no harm, bartering for rent, pitching in with house sitting, babysitting, cooking in order to get studio time, cash, or art supplies. I share this backstory because I think it directly connects with experimentation. Living with some structure, but also some unknown, has allowed me a chance for creativity in my life. Sure, it can be messy sometimes, leaving things to chance, but very unexpected and wondrous outcomes can also occur. After apprenticing with textile designer Berta Bray in California, in a town just south of San Francisco, I began printing with potatoes, and my first business, Spud Prints, was born. This little experimentation grew from 1986 into a full-time job for me, hiring part-time helpers and 3 sales reps. I hand-painted t-shirts many hours a day, 10, and loved every minute of it. Yeah. And if you want to hear stories about this business, my husband and I have like a little precursor to our love story from 1989. So, about t-shirts I designed for him.
I was single, living here in Underhill on a very big property, and realized we needed to have big parties, so we had pig roasts. Very large parties with hundreds of people, actually. For the last party, though, each party would require receiving some sort of income to pay the expenses of all the food to feed hundreds of people. So we would sell t-shirts. And I designed the t-shirts initially for the first 3 years, and they were pretty boring. But I met Mary along the way, or I knew Mary, and I knew she was an artist, and I thought, and I liked her too at the time. I thought she was really pretty. Wasn't my chance to take it any further. This was back in 1989. Yeah, so we hired Mary to make our t-shirt. And the interesting thing about it is everyone called this Hay Hill where I lived, because it's sort of a hill, and it was known as Hay Hill. So the t-shirts had on them Hay Hill, designed by Mary Hill. And then
Oh my God.
20 years later, we run into each other again and connect, and now we are Hay Hill again officially. And I still have the very first t-shirt that was the model for those designs, and I bring it out every now and then to show them.
And none of his tribe of guys that ran this party with him liked the t-shirt. They all voted no.
It was way too avant-garde. It was too futuristic, and I don't know if you had the
I know. Well, I didn't realize. So yeah,
The
next time we'll
designs
wear
were-
them.
arrows and pigs with like.
Oh, I thought it was porcupines, but yeah.
They look like porcupines.
They look like
exactly.
Yeah.
They look, and everyone was like, "No," and I convinced them, "No, these are
great."
We sold out every single T-shirt we sold. They loved it.
And then,
And the woman on my left here, that's me with a big black
Yeah.
t-shirt, was my art teacher in high school. So
You're in the white?
I'm
No.
actually not in the right side. I'm just in the left side in the big, huge black.
Oh,
Sure.
that's you, it's short hair
Yeah,
and a hat.
I'm 30 pounds lighter. Yeah. I was 29 when I got married in 1990. I stayed at home with my 2 sons for 8 years, which were some of the best years of my life. Talk about experimenting. Babies and toddlers were perfect for my skill set. Making food, napping, skipping to the park, coloring, repeat. I trained up artists. They were a captive audience. We made patchwork quilts, began painting on walls, and I got out of the clothing business. They're 25 and 26 now. There's one of the quilts that I made, all these little sort of lap quilt, art quilt kind of. I just gave them all away. I don't even know where they are.
You painted them?
They're stenciled with fabric paint, yep. So like all the pairs are on black fabric. 12 years later, in 2001, my first husband and I divorced. Our 2 small boys were in 1st and 2nd grade. We decided on 50-50 custody, and I went back to work full-time as a freelance artist. After my divorce, I had to make something happen with my career. We lived in the Mad River Valley, and I joined the Artisans Gallery and sold items showcasing hand-printed fabrics, potholders and aprons and onesies. I worked at the local B&B to pay my rent. In a chain of events I never could have planned, a friend dropped off a truckload of 6-inch by 6-inch wood scraps from the lumber yard. That's on the left. Being aware that I needed some wood to burn in my small stove and I could use the help. These pieces of wood became my next great thing and sold like hotcakes. So they were just these little pieces. I thought I brought one, but I guess I didn't. And they had a little hook on the back, and they just were all the early sort of believe, trust, bright colors, and all this wood. I had like a wood shed full of this wood. And so I painted these all winter and gratefully burned the wood. Eventually I ran out. These wooden blocks were the rustic precursors to my banners. And has everybody seen my banners? No? Okay. I just figured everybody had seen them. So the banners are like, and so they're black canvas, and did them for a long time. I transitioned to buying bolts of black canvas from Joann's Fabrics, sewing it into lots of custom shapes, and the banners were born. These two became a hit, and I painted these for years with special commissions for NOFA and a successful midwife business, farmers market growers, and local counseling offices. A few years in, I began taking digital images with my very basic camera. It turned out my little works of art looked fabulous in digital form. You can go to the next one. So the cards just have been they just work as cards.
So, Mary, the black is not painted. It's the canvas is black and you're painting around the black.
That's all color. So it's
Okay.
like a dark
Okay.
blue. Yeah. So the canvas is all painted. Meanwhile, my broken heart was still broken, but I was working to succeed as an artist and a single mom. As you can see, I've not been one to set a logical path for my life. My poor parents, whenever I went home, which was a lot when the kids were little, would sit me down and let me know this would be a good time to get your teaching degree. Watching their daughter struggle was not a pretty picture, and stubborn, willful person that I am, maybe, would resist their advice. I knew from other friends who taught art they did very little of it on their own.
Oh.
That's South Hero. I'm sharing this story as a way to say that this latest phase worked. I began selling cards to gift and bookstores all over Vermont. I sold banners through stores and offered workshops for people to paint their own. This era lasted from 2003 until a few years ago. Okay. More banners. Do you recognize the banners now? Yeah. I've been working to move out of the banner format and discover new ways to share my art. Usually I have to go through the ringer as change happens, and I often feel like I've failed. So the woman on the left is a stock photograph that I chose to represent me feeling like I failed. The joys of being a thin-skinned, mood-swinging, part-time introvert. Now, let's talk experimenting. I feel like the world is ready for new ideas, new ways of doing things, and my art can reflect that as I practice experimenting daily in my studio. This winter I began experimenting with things I found in the studio: mortar, pins, flotsam. So those guys are in the case over there, and they're like smaller than cupcake size. Yeah, don't they look sort of foodish? Yeah.
So those are like sewing pins?
Yeah, those are sewing pins. They look really interesting this big, but yeah. So this is a sewn piece that's probably 15 by 10. And it's just something I'd really like to get back to because it feels like a comic strip or something. It's very fun. And that's a piece of paper sewn collage with a flower, an artificial flower that's really great, sort of wine color on the top. And then these guys are my people. I have one in the cupboard, and I brought one. I had to ask them. There's, I guess, 25 of them in my studio who wanted to come out and see you guys.
What is the?
They're kind of introverted.
Very introverted. I don't blame them.
It's okay. They're very nice. Anyway, these guys I'm really excited to work with.
Mary, what's the face made out of?
It's kind of kindergarten quick dry clay. And when I started these, I was thinking I was going to make pretty goddesses and potato print and hand paint their clothes.
So when you say potato print, you literally mean painting on a potato and using that as your print, as
Yeah.
your stamp?
Yeah, yeah. Potatoes are great for print tools. So,
They didn't want to be pretty goddesses, did they?
no, they didn't.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
She's
So a lot of
great.
them
Oh
are
my
pretty
gosh,
gender
I love it.
fluid, and I don't know. They're just some of them look a little constipated. But you can go up there. But a lot of the stuff that I'm putting on them is stuff I found on the road, that's been mushed, or cans and things. And so if you have anything in your junk drawer that makes you think of the people and you want to donate it to me, I will take it. That's it. There's some just weird stuff that I brought. This was for a class I did, and it was a year-long class. It's burlap. And so the idea of this class was, this was a symbol of how long things take. So I just brought a motley crew of strange little things I'm doing. I'm going to the thrift store a lot these days. This is a table runner, and I just stenciled all over it. It had this pattern all over it. Now when I've ironed this, it's polyester, so it's melted. So my kids who are 25 and 26 really said, Mom, you really should get back into spud prints. So I've been doing a little bit of clothing, kinds of. This is a little purse that my cousin in South Dakota gave me when I visited her. It was our grandmother's. Penny asked why why did I buy black fabric once I ran out of the wood pieces, since I then paint over it. When I did the hand-painted clothing, a lot of it was black, and I really enjoyed painting on black. It's very rich. My friends would tease me and say, you're doing those Elvis Presley velvet paintings. But there's a richness in the black, because I've just painted this purpley color over it, but there's a lot of black coming through. A lot of times people ask me if my work is batiqued, and I think it's because I often will use the black as part of the color, Anyway, so this is another thing I'm experimenting with. This is printed with bubble wrap. So here's just fabric design, and then I started doing sewing on top of the fabric. So this is kind of where I'm experimenting a lot.
A few years ago, you had an art exhibit at the hospital. I think I told you the story, but everybody else doesn't know it. It was on the long corridor between the lobby and where you go to the main part of the hospital, and I was heading for a biopsy that day, so I was kind of scared and worried. And as I'm walking along, I had to stop. I didn't even know that was your work hanging on the wall. It was so cheerful. It was hearts and flowers and people dancing, and the colors were bright. And I just stopped to look at it closely and delay my my torture by a little bit. And it made me feel so good. It was like, oh my gosh, this, You know, I know that the hospital's putting art there to make people feel cheerful,
Yeah.
but it really worked.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's an extension, I have to share, there's a little more to that. We had heard that some parents came through with their son, who I don't remember what his problem was.
Nonverbal.
He hadn't spoken in whatever years, but as they walked down that hallway, he just stopped in front of those, they were what, like 6x6 heart. One of them was just big heart.
Yes.
And some other fabulous, colorful pictures. He stopped and I think he spoke and cried.
Oh my gosh.
And it was his parents.
He was really happy. Yeah. Yeah.
It was the first time
They
he
wrote
spoke
me
in
this
a
beautiful email. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what kind of paint are you using? Are you using?
Acrylic,
Acrylic?
basic, pretty cheap acrylic, house paint. Depends on what I'm doing. A lot of times with things that I'm experimenting with, like that piece, I just have surrendered to just using house paint and leftover paint from projects, just so I don't feel precious about like, oh, this is my really nice Holbein, you know, something or other. So I do paint on canvases, real grown-up canvases too. But they're so big to carry around.
It seems like a lot of the conversation is about how cheery and uplifting your banners have been over the years. So is it, do you feel pressured to continue that line when you're wanting to experiment, but people know you as the banners?
Yeah, I mean, I have. I've sort of quit the banners for the last 6 years. Not the community banners, but my own people who buy them for their stores and things. And part of it is I could just keep doing them, but I really need to move along. And what's next? You know, am I doing this on the side of Airbuses? You know, or like, I mean, tick tick tick. I'm almost 60. It's like, what else is there? So.
I think about the community banners. We moved to Vermont, Underhill, about 3 years ago. And we bought our house spring, summer, and those banners really hit home. We were looking at all these towns in the, you know, outside Burlington area, and I was like, Underhill's, you know, it just hit home.
These are just, every so often I just try to paint. I don't know. I'm just trying to do things a little differently. I can't seem to get away from the color. So, yeah. This is mixed media, some of my dad's old shirts, pages of my mom's hymnal, strange, weird things, if you want to pass it back. I have a lot of stuff in my studio that's just meaningful to me, and it's just kind of stuff that you should throw out, but it's like scraps of my dad's shirts, or I don't know, just things that I'm attracted to somehow. And so then I just get out the acrylic medium and just kind of glue things, and I work with my left hand. I scrape things with combs, and I don't know, it's just a happy dance, you know? I'm just not thinking about selling anything right now, because I've always done that with the shirts and then other pieces that I used to do, and then I would make, and I love to make not one, but 300. You know, I love that. It's like, okay, let's set up a sale, you know? So I do love doing that, but this I'm just trying to just not think about that. That being said, everything's for sale. The dots are actually a little stencil that I have, and this is also a stencil that I have. So something like this, I might, we have turkeys in our yard. So I might put that guy on there. this is a perfect kind of thing to bring with you on a train or in a waiting room. Something like that. And then I really like this color, so I would probably just doing hand stitching through the whole thing. Just like that. Yeah. Thanks, you guys. Thank you.